Welcome to Fail Smarter, the series where I, Leander Seidel, interview interesting marketeers about their most educational, most exciting, or most dramatic marketing fails of their career. Today I'm here with Reginald, who is one of my first guests who actually reached out to me, which I really appreciate. And he's gonna tell us one of the fails from his career. So, first of all, could you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about what is it that you do on a daily basis in the world of marketing.
I've been so yeah, I'm Reginald. I'm 37, based in Geneva, Switzerland, and I've been in marketing I think my entire life, even when I was studying at the University of Geneva, and I was already like we were in a students association where we were offering services to companies. So as a way to practice our skills, they called the junior enterprises. And so I've always been in that field. And then when I left uni, I became a like an independent consultant. The goal was to help companies without a CMO deliver on their marketing needs, like pretty much be like an in-house project manager. So I've done this most of my life, and then transitioned towards business coaching in the startup world, transitioned towards building my own projects, and then but I had this approach where I like to get people to basically make myself useful more than being as an agency. We were small setup. So then I launched the Fuck Up Nights in 2014 as a way of showing the type of marketer I was. So a way of showing what you could do with very little budget, make an impact, and then just it just grew and became this massive thing. So overall I'm a consultant, I'm a speaker, and I guess some would say an entrepreneur also sometimes.
That's really wonderful, and it's a great connection also that you have this fuck up nights background, because that's exactly what I want to do with this show, with a focus on marketing. And that leads me right to my next obvious question, which is which fail would you like to share today from your marketing experience?
Yeah, I had to think about it because I had some fails that were, for example, more operational, some were more structural, not necessarily marketing based. But I think I would go back in time. It's a fail from, it's on my LinkedIn. It's at the very, very, very bottom. There was a company called Horizon Prod, like Horizon Prod, which is a production company. We used to host comedy shows, live acts, concerts, and stuff around the city of Geneva. And I came in, I was 22 years old, I think, give or take. And I came in, and my boss, a really small company, was him and I. So I was like an intern slash assistant slash, I don't know, like do it all, know it all. He wanted to do English acts. So the thing in Geneva is a French speaking city, and at the time there were few promoters that were bringing in English comedians, English speaking comedians, and he wanted to do it. He had no understanding of the landscape, no understanding of the audience. But it was like, listen, we have an English speaking radio, we have a few social media for expats who speak English. Let's bring an act. Let's do it. So I was in charge of the first act. It was a girl called Rebecca Carrington, and Rebecca Carrington was a prominent cello player. But she did like comedy with cello, and her husband was a very well known vocalist. He was, I think, a background singer for Robbie Williams. And I remember the whole show, the way we planned it. We had some ads running. It was weird ads on what we call World Radio Switzerland, which is our English speaking radio. We did a few small things. It was before the social media days. It was before the prominence of Facebook, and we were in a venue for 400 people. So we were convinced that with whatever marketing that we did, and I was supposed to be in charge, but I didn't. I wasn't the one like doing the media planning. I didn't know what was being done. We were looking at the sales, and we were like, "Don't worry, it's gonna be fine." With my first show, and we were sure we are gonna have 440, 450 people, so full venue. Spend the whole day with the artists, and they were like, "So how? What are the sales?" And the sales were like at 40 or like 35 or something. And I was like, "Don't worry, in Geneva, people come in last minute. They will fill the venue." And after a whole day with the artists, and I learned so much. I remember sitting there in the hall. I had some friends there too. That was the worst part. Uh, that was filled up to like I think 10% of capacity. So basically, imagine 10% of a 400 like theater, 400 seater is nothing. And I remember, I think it was one of my first very lesson of, it's not because you have a marketing plan, it's not because you have like succession of actions that are planned that they're going to have the impact you want, especially for an artist that's not well known locally, for a very specific audience. In a like and even the date was probably questioned, but at the time, you're 22, you believe whatever your boss tells you, and whatever you believe, right? So it was a smack in the face, I think, and that was my very first event ever. So you start from like the bottom, and I remember it was interesting because it really made me want to go for it. So it made me like, I at that moment you can either fight or flight. You could have run away, but you were like, no, okay, like we're gonna get back to it and be much more thorough, much more organized in our campaigns to promote the event.
I really love that in multiple aspects because, on the one side, I think it gives us a nice glimpse into something that we, as the digital marketing generation, aren't so used to anymore. That era before social media ads. That's interesting. The other thing is, I think what's really great about it is it has a certain feeling of product market fit as well, where probably this is a great product, a great artist, like cello comedy. I've never even thought about this concept, but it sounds very unique. But I guess if either it didn't reach the right audience, or maybe there is not even a regional audience for that. So that might be an interesting factor as
And
well.
then at some point, I love the angle into the product market fit is that there's something very direct about events. There's something very direct about nightlife parties, like for example DJs. There's certain levers where you're like, okay, you pick that day, you pick that time, you pick that artist, it should work. And some artists now in the digital age will book themselves through a story on Instagram. Promoter will say he's coming to your city. 24 hours later, it's booked. So some artists, comedians, singers, they have that. But that was a reminder of sometimes your product will need more education, right? So let's say it works for any product, any app, any whatever. Like you need to educate the audience. Maybe you need to do more press. Maybe the right media is also the more traditional media should have been involved also, because it's not because it's in English, the people who speak French. It's not because I'm a French speaker, right? I don't listen to World Radio Switzerland. So that means I could have been just as interested in the traditional medias. So there's a lot of, and that's areas I've seen a lot with startups, not necessarily SMEs, because startups like to garner traction through the media of saying, okay, so I'm interesting because I think what I'm doing is interesting. So the media needs to know about what I do. And then they were like, the media's like, okay, but we know about what you do. Okay, sure, you're local, but we're not feeding anything new to our audience. So you need to give me an angle. And so sometimes it's just there's a disconnect in the expectations, I guess.
And that's a wonderful one as well. Like feeding that angle is something that a lot of companies then forget, and they just want to tell their own
For
story
sure.
because they're so excited and so confident. Which again fits that story that like you're super confident in the quality of your product, but sometimes the audience just wants something differently. And so to kind of wrap it up, what I'd be
Mhm.
curious is there something then like we already covered some lessons that you kind of learned from it, but in the immediate aftermath, is there something you were able to change for follow-up concerts in the same time frame that went better afterwards?
So in the we the tricky part of that this project was that it was our first. We were working with a very prominent UK promoter that was sending his artists, and Rebecca was kind of like his pupil, his protege. So that was kind of like the first test before sending us the bigger fishes, and so we were kind of scared also that she would send back saying they don't know what they're doing. But I guess since we had good customer service in a way that worked out. What we learned at that moment is I was much more hands on the second time around. So we did Dylan Moore and another. I think he's is he Irish or Scottish, one or the other. Comedian. It was a bigger venue, so it was a bit more risk. We did a good number, but again, the only day we had was Pentecôte, so it's like the religious holiday. I think on the Thursday, it was a bit tricky, but it was a much better turnout. It's just that at some point, for example, in this specific case, they needed to be full. Like at some point, they need the artist to be in a full venue. But I think my biggest lesson was doing so much more research. Like even though I'm known in Geneva for taking a lot of risks, it's like importing, an event on failure, even if it's a free meetup in a country that was allegedly known for not being very open to it. Media wise, it was a success, but now I do much more research. I think on the ideas that I had, on even if it's a small project, 1 minute, like one night, 1 hour, to make sure that we have access to the right either communities, mediums, or influencers or whoever that will like that the value of what I'm bringing to the table is recognized and not just perceived in my head. So I guess it was like a cautionary tale that it's like a voice in your head that say make sure the audience. What made me, I think at that moment it made me more customer centric. Like before, customer centric was a thing, you know. So yeah, that was the real switch, I think, in that sense.
I think there's really like a lot of value in there because it's in one sense about research and strategy planning in the beginning, but also that tactical topics about the international radio, which only reaches the international audience, and then also just or like the non-French speaking audience, but actually also targeting all types of different audiences and kind of
Yeah,
picking them up where they are at and coming to them in their native language and on their native channels. I think that's something that kind of translates very well from back in those radio days to what we have to do
yeah.
now with all the social media advertising, etc. If we blast one English ad in a region where we have a lot of different languages, we're basically potentially leading a lot of possible revenue that we're not
You're
leaving on the
narrowing,
table.
no matter how big the pool of who you think you're targeting is, one of these levers makes it then become significantly smaller. Oh, you do it in English. Oh, it's not for me. All of a sudden, people are like, I'm going to discount an ad that's in English, even though it's not that I don't speak it. It's like, oh, it's not for me. Like we filter so much faster. So all these little details can have an impact on, well, I thought I targeted 1,000 people. No, so you targeted 10 just because of one factor. So that makes it so much harder. So yeah, it's
Exactly. I do love one thing about that you said, like, oh, you know, like the first one was a failure, and so for the second one, you went for an even bigger venue. I love that mindset. It's like a kind of all or nothing approach. It's kind of like going to the casino and winning everything back after taking a hit. I think it's a nice approach to it as well.
I didn't say when I introduced myself, but I think it really does have an influence on me. I was born in Queens, New York, so in New York, and I was raised in Canada. Then I moved to Switzerland, and I feel like a part of how I do anything entrepreneurial is inspired by the sometimes you got to go big. Some of those, like those one liners, go big or go home. Like I am that type of person, especially when it's risky somehow. As I get older, I think that changed. 15 years later, I'll be honest, you take a lot of punches in your face, then you're like, okay, stop. But it is true that doubling down was also a way of saying just be more prepared or work with better partners. We partnered up with local social media for expats. Like we had tried different things. So I guess as long as I have options, I keep, sometimes you just keep going, keep fighting.
I think that's a really wonderful conclusion to this as well. To keep being motivated, even if you do take a hit once or twice, it's still possible to keep going. Well, Reginald, thank you so much for
No problem.
sharing this failure. Do you have any channels where people can follow you? LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram,
Link,
anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure. Really, it's Réginald Bien-Aimé and my name and my Instagram also. I think I like having people who follow me through these types of content. It's the only Reggie and with the number one. Definitely open to sharing it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the year with wonderful failures and a lot of valuable lessons learned from it.
Hopefully, as always. Thank you.